Alrighty. So the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit is super excited to be hosting BSEC on our April webinar. I can't believe it's April already. Oh my goodness. Really excited to be hosting Dr. James Hunter at Morgan State University, Dr. Ben Zaitchik at Johns Hopkins, and Khalia Young, who is also at Morgan State University. They're going to be overviewing BSEC and telling us kind of the ins and outs of the program, how it's impacting the community, and all the cool work that they've been doing with this program funded by the Department of Energy. Before we jump into what BSEC is going to present today, just wanted to give you all an overview of the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit. This initiative is all about increasing awareness and education on environment and climate in the region, also eliminating funding opportunities, creating synchronized agendas across different institutions and organizations, and also creating a safe space to talk about challenges in the sector. We're super grateful to all of our partners and everyone who showed up for us and who aligned on the objectives and the shared mission of the summit last year in November. We are looking forward to our summit this upcoming November. And as you guys know, we've been having some virtual webinars just showcasing different tools, different initiatives and programs in the region that are doing great work in the climate and environmental space. Just to give you an overview of how today is going to go, I've already told you a little bit about the summit and what we are all about. The presentations from BSEC are going to go in the order you see on the screen. We'll open it up for Q&A, so you guys can feel free to come off mute, ask questions directly, or put them in the chat. We'll then do some breakout sessions where you all will have an opportunity to mix and mingle with each other and also talk with speakers. And then after the breakout sessions, we'll come back to the larger group and we'll recap what we discussed, and then we'll close out. So what I will do is stop sharing, and I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Zaitchik.
Great. Thank you so much, Khalia. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and thank you all for making time for this. Give a super fast overview of the Baltimore Social Environmental Collaborative. So this is a collaborative that involves folks from Johns Hopkins, from Morgan State, from UMBC, from Penn State, from a bunch of other universities, several agencies of Baltimore city government and community groups as well involved, and local NGOs, alongside some federal partners from the Department of Energy, which sponsors the work, as well as a couple of other agencies. So what is this about? What are we trying to do with this? So BSEC has as its mission to generate the science that we need to inform pathways for energy security and extreme weather resilience in Baltimore. And the key thing about BSEC, to my mind, is that we recognize that when you talk about the science that's needed to inform these pathways, the only way you do that is by co-generating knowledge across fields, across communities, across different spheres of Baltimore, which is why it's been so important to us to have a foundation in community groups, city agencies, and the researchers together, and to reach out broadly to get more people involved in each stage of the process. And so what this looks like in general schematic form is that BSEC's been going on for about 2.5 years now. It's scheduled to be a 5-year project. And we started out with and continue to do a lot of deliberation with our partners and other community members on what kinds of goals we have for resilience and equity in Baltimore. We link that to some of the scientific efforts on measurement and modeling, and that's a diverse thing that involves a lot of physically based modeling, getting instrumentation to the field, but also building computer models, and also convening together to get information on social demographic data that matters for this kind of process. We bring that together into this trade-off analysis and discussion. So once you've identified what your priority risks that you want to address or opportunities you want to take advantage of collectively, and you've got your measurement and modeling system built to get the data you need that's relevant to those issues, then you come together to figure out how do we achieve our goals collectively. And ideally, if you once you iterate on this a few times, because you're never going to get it right the first time, you then come out with some we're calling these secured resilient pathways, these possible ways that we could move together quickly as a city to achieve some of these really energy access and climate resilience goals. So I'm not going to have time to talk much about the details on any of this, just to point out that the deliberations on goals and constraints that's been going on for a couple of years yielded four kind of priority areas that came up in numerous roundtables and discussion groups, and also echo what a lot of you know already were identified as priorities in various city action plans. And those are extreme heat, air pollution, but with a real focus on exposures indoor, considering some of the housing stock in Baltimore, flooding, and then finally this question of energy security. As we move towards our net zero future, how do we do that in a way that really alleviates energy poverty in our communities rather than moving towards net zero in a way that might actually harm people trying to meet their energy bills? Measurement modeling system. And so this is what we spend a tremendous amount of our time on. And James might talk a little bit more about this in his time. Simply put out, this is an outdated map that I desperately need to update, but making the point here that we are trying to make measurements in a diverse set of environmental and social ways. You might see some of us out around town doing mobile measurements sometimes, stationary measurements, participating in surveys, and really trying to both expand the kind of information that we have from an environmental perspective in Baltimore, and also close data gaps, particularly in the black butterfly, places where communities have been systematically excluded from data collection in the past. Is trying to work with those communities to get the information we need on local weather hazards, local air pollution, local water quality, these kinds of issues. We also get to integrate some of this information with health information we're getting from the Johns Hopkins Health Hospital System, as well as the state of Maryland, and some information we get on energy from Baltimore Gas and Electric. Just want to point out that as we do this, it's fun, so I hope everyone wants to get on board and participate in this. Khalia has been instrumental in getting a lot of the community science project and educational efforts going. Here we got one of our Hopkins students out working with some YouthWorks interns on collecting soils last summer. Also, it's really an integrated effort with a broader effort to make Baltimore the hub for climate resilience information for cities, really nationally and globally. And this is just a shot of a facility at Morgan State, where we've got some BSEC instrumentation and also some ongoing Morgan State Climate Center measurements and balloon soundings going on, really trying to work together to make sure that we put Baltimore at the forefront of these efforts. All that measurement and modeling, we're doing a ton of stuff with it. Would love to follow up with people on different details, but just to point out some nice things we can do with this. This was a little memo that went out last summer during some of those really brutal heat waves we had in the summer of 2024, showing how this community-supported Baltimore weather station network that BSEC helped put together could show us what the urban heat island looked like during a heat wave. Where was it hotter? Where was it cooler? And in fact, finding out like, hey, it's maybe 8 to 10 degrees hotter at some of these East Baltimore and inner city locations compared to some of the areas in the suburb. We're able to work with our community partners to get that information out, and working now with them on dashboarding so that the communities have access to that information in real time. We then integrate those observations and models so that we can understand what's happening in places that we can't measure directly. So here we're just zooming into kind of a section of East Baltimore. You can see Lake Montebello at the northern edge of this image. And the red dots here are places where we've got weather stations with community partners. And then what you're seeing in these colors, these are temperature variations at a snapshot in time based on an advanced computer model we're able to run fit to the data collected from those community locations. So we can get to the point where we, by integrating measurements and models, have estimates at all times of where it's hotter, where it's cooler, and also doing this for beyond just temperature, looking at extreme rainfall, air quality, other areas of interest. Okay, I don't want to take much more time, so I'm just going to very quickly say, well, what does this trade-off analysis and discussion look like? And the way we do that is we draw on some work that actually came, years ago out of things like big river management systems and national defense exercises, which is you're trying to do decision-making under deep uncertainty. And so what you do is you start off by saying, okay, there are certain uncertainties we have to deal with, these external factors. How might climate change? How might economic development happen? What are some areas that we just don't have information on? Then we have our levers, which are like, what actions can we take? Maybe that's about planting trees. Maybe it's about reducing concrete coverage. Maybe it's cool roofs. Maybe it's stormwater management. And then most importantly, to my mind, we come together and talk about what are the metrics? What are we trying to achieve together? If we want to reduce heat, what's that about? Is it about saving lives in part? Is it about reducing energy bills? Probably that too. Is it about having kids have positive learning environments and getting outside to play? Yeah, but all of those metrics might point to different levers that you use to achieve those metrics. And then once we, as working collectively through BSEC, can map out the relationships about how various levers under different uncertainties might influence metrics, we can then come together and say, well, here are some possible ways to achieve those metrics that we can convene around, decide if they make sense. So we're doing this for all four of those topic areas that I mentioned at the beginning. Just very briefly, on extreme heat, which is one where we've made some progress and had some good roundtables with some folks I saw some names online I recognize from your participation. So thank you for helping us with these roundtables and other engagements. We can say if we're trying to achieve various things, including saving lives, reducing inequities, saving money, maybe sequestering some carbon, helping the city achieve its net zero goals through tree planting, other carbon sequestration. We could say, well, how much money might we invest on different kinds of strategies in different places? We then run this multi-criteria optimization model and say, okay, well, where would we invest over the next 30 to 50 years? And these color schemes are just showing which neighborhoods we might invest on one scenario that ended up doing a lot of tree planting. We didn't tell it to do that, but that was one way to achieve these goals. And then on the right-hand side, another option that was more based on infrastructure, more on cool roofs, more on reducing pavement coverage, that kind of thing. And as you'll see, it means you invest in different places in different amounts, and the totals are very different. And the goals and what you achieve is different. The green-focused one was really good at reducing deaths. The infrastructure-focused one was really better at reducing inequity. And so depending on how you do this, you can then come together and say, well, which of these plans or which combinations of these plans make sense for Baltimore? And can we get to the point where we have robust agreement on the general strategy going forward? And we can then get down to the neighborhood scale. And what we're seeing here is all the neighborhoods of Baltimore, the community statistical areas, and saying in the colors, how much money are we investing in each of these neighborhoods for different strategies over 50 years in order to achieve these goals? And you might see that these two look different. The one on the left is the greening pathway. The one on the right is one that's more about infrastructure. You put different amounts of money in different places. And again, this is part of a conversation to say which of these pathways, which of these strategies make sense for us and which of them don't. And do we have to go back to the drawing board to really come up with a solution that works for the diverse communities of our city? So that's it. Again, we're working together to try to generate the science we need, and we can only do that if we all work together. So I'll stop here and hand it over to James. Hopefully this sharing is now available.
I was muted. All right. Thanks, Ben. And I do want to just acknowledge Ben Zaitchik and his partnership and really getting helping to get Morgan State involved with this research and helping us to partner with the other universities that are helping us to do this important work. What I'm going to focus on is an example of one of the areas that we're doing within one of our theme teams. And that's focusing on flood risk throughout the city of Baltimore and trying to figure out what types of adaptations we can make within the city involving green infrastructure as we're looking at robust decision making. And if you're in the city of Baltimore and you've seen some of the storms that we've had in our area, historically we have all the different types of flooding, including type of flooding when you have riverine or fluvial flooding where water is cresting over from our streams. We also have coastal or tidal flooding that's happening within the inner harbor. And one of the things we're really focusing on is looking at what we call these cloudburst events and how it's causing pluvial flooding or street flooding, where our storm drain systems cannot handle a lot of that water for different reasons. And this is just an example of what we see very close to Morgan State in the Ednor Gardens lakeside neighborhood, where buses have been floating, or cars have been floating along 35th and Hillen. And then part of that is because we have some historic streams that are piped through these storm systems. So they're always conveying some level of base flow. But when we get these big storms, it usually erupts in the surcharging of these areas, and we get flooding. Sometimes the flooding can get as deep as 8 to 9 feet historically in these areas. So this is something that happens throughout the city, and sometimes um, there's flooding throughout the city, but we're really trying to get a better understanding of when and where these storm events are happening. But this is one of the case studies we're working on, and what we're able to do through some of the modeling is the focus on these areas of concern. We're using various stormwater models. This one that you're looking at in terms of the animations is coming from CityCat. We're using other models like SWIM and PC SWIM to understand the nature of this flooding. And then we need to have very active engagement with the communities so that we know when and where the flooding is happening. We use 311, 911 data, but it also requires us to go into the neighborhoods, talk to people, engage with people through surveys and focus groups so that we can validate and calibrate the model, making sure that our model results are accurate. And our model is showing very similar results to what we see from what the city has been modeling with their consultants. But what we want to be able to do with this model is go throughout the entire city of Baltimore and try and find these areas where we know there are chronic flooding issues. And this is an example of flooding that happens when we have these big events in the Cherry Hill area. And we're showing flooding that's happening through here. And then we can start to use some other tools and even using some AI generated images to try and communicate flood risk to people within the different neighborhoods that we're engaging with. We're also able to go into that decision-making and modeling process to look at how we can begin to adapt to flooding. And we're working very closely with the Broadway East neighborhood to do some modeling through there and try and determine not only how we can reduce the flood risk and flood depth, but also try and look at other co-benefits, particularly when we're looking at green infrastructure and really overlaying some of the work that Ben's group is doing in terms of urban heat, along with looking at stormwater infrastructure and where we see that flooding, to try and figure out where can we place these projects and really optimize the solutions that may be available. And we do that through that XLRM process. And we try and find the best pathways for doing that. So when we're talking about green infrastructure, really looking at a lot of those co-benefits, but also really working with communities to really determine what are the preferences, and then understanding some of those climate projections and determining how we can best take care of these neighborhoods, particularly those that really lack a lot of the natural infrastructure. And we understand that there are a lot of co-benefits that we get from looking at green infrastructure and the benefits that they can have in some of these neighborhoods. So I will stop there and hand it over to Khalia.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Khalia Young. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator with BSEC. And so after hearing Ben talk about the co-generation and Dr. Hunter talk about kind of like focus groups and how we are working with community, I'm sure everyone is really interested in learning about how you can get involved and how we're actually connecting with community throughout the process. And so today I want to focus mostly on our science education program, but give a brief overview of the different types of engagement that we have that we've been working on and how we've been collaborating with Baltimore City residents. In my role as the community engagement coordinator, I spend majority of my time going to events, meetings, and just discussing different community priorities with residents and organizations. You know, what are their focuses? What are they working on? What different strategies are they implementing in their communities to address some of the environmental changes that are occurring? And so we can do that through multiple ways. As I said, attending meetings and events. We actually just hosted a science fair on Monday where we showcased a lot of our different modeling and measuring tools. The weather station deployments, which I do have an updated map that I can share towards the end, Ben, and then the science education program. And so that program, BSEC is split up into 9 different theme teams. And we are collaborating with community to develop this science education workshops. I have the scope of work here laid out into 6 sections. I wanted to highlight the scope of work because that is how we are working with community to develop out the workshops through site visits with them, meetings with them, and like I said, kind of determining what their strengths are, what their needs are and their priorities. We've developed out different workshops that we can host. In my engagement with folks, I like to kind of try to find that intersection between research and community, which I found is the empowerment aspect of it. So how are we training and providing education to where folks feel empowered even after these workshops, you know, or in their personal life or in their professional life, to use the tools that we have to do their own science? And how are we training up, you know, other community data scientists and contributing to the work that they're already doing? And so one way to make sure we are, you know, laying out structured way to work with community, we did that through a scope of work, which is broken down into the context. Why are we co-creating with community? Why is it important? The purpose, which is to provide science education and training, program goals and outcomes. And like I said, that is more so for the community to kind of add in, you know, what are their programs and their outcomes for how they're working with youth or other adults to make sure it aligns. The learning objectives, responsibilities of both BSEC and the community partner that we're working with on the science education program, and the budget. And so at the end of each of the workshops, there are 3 2-hour workshops that we provide. We worked with youth last year. This year it's a mixture of youth and adults, but each person gets about $150 at the end of each workshop. So compensating folks for their time is also a best practice that we definitely want to implement and continue to implement. A few of the learning objectives that, like I said, were developed based on what community wanted from BSEC. So learning the basic scientific knowledge on urban environment ecology, knowledge on the tools needed to do their own measurements and modeling, some interactive training with scientists, how can they use this information for the betterment of their community? Are they prepared to conduct their own testing and training with their peers? And then how can they understand the studies being done in their neighborhood? How do the studies being done in their neighborhood shed light on their health? So how do we prepare the program? As I mentioned before, site visits, meetings, sharing the scope of work kind of back and forth to make sure it aligns with their priorities and what they're looking for out of the partnership with BSEC, and then the actual implementation. I do want to highlight as well, last year we worked with 3 partners, Temple X, Plantation Park Heights Urban Farm, and Liberty Recon-Tech. This year we're working with Parks and People and a veterans group in Ashburton community. And so we're working on developing kind of a pipeline to keep folks engaged. And so I'm working with also Dr. Shamar from Morgan State University to implement refresher courses for those that did the program last year, and then working with, like I said, our new sites this year with added theme teams. So a few of the different activities that we had the youth participating in, they assembled the weather stations. We had them download the data from the Ambient app, and they discussed how they can use this data to predict weather in the future. We also walked through green spaces on the site and did tree measurements and established what trees were present, so did some identification, collected soil samples, water samples and did some infiltration activities. And then the community empowerment aspect, which we worked on with one of our partners to develop out a one-pager on how can we empower the youth to continue this work after the workshop if they're not already doing it. So we highlighted 311 and the use of 311. How can they put in a report? Why should they put in reports? How can they organize the community members in their neighborhood to put in a report to keep their environment clean and safe and healthy? And so 2 main takeaways from developing the program with the community is that co-creation allows program development to be relatable to individuals involved, relevant to community needs, and offers the opportunity for relationship building. Also being able to leverage existing programs and meeting the community where they are. So I think it's important to show that, BSEC isn't coming into, Baltimore with this brand new, data or concept. The folks are already, doing their own mitigation and have their own strategies. And so it's a matter of partnership and how can we uplift what community is doing and continue to build those relationships. And so I mentioned that we did the program last year. This year we have 2 new collaborators, and last year we did the vegetation and soils, atmospheric dynamics, and water quality theme team. This year it's 2 of the same theme teams plus air quality. And we'll be taking folks on a field trip to the Courage site in East Baltimore to see some of the balloon launchings. So yeah, essentially the science education program just allows us to continue to build relationships and work with our current partners on community empowerment and how we can continue to, find that intersection between research and community. Thank you.
That was so awesome. Thank you all so much. I'm sure everybody has a lot of questions, so we can open it up for Q&A. And if you want to just come off mute, you're more than welcome to do that. If you want to raise your hand, and if you want to put a question in the chat, we're happy to read that out loud and have the panelist answer any questions that you have.
I also forgot to share the map that I mentioned, so I'm going to upload that file in the chat.
Don't be shy. I'm shocked. Usually there's like 5 questions
We
by now.
do have
I don't mind starting.
a question, I apologize, in the chat. It says, how do we get information on the balloon launching?
Yes, so you can connect with me. We did a balloon launching on Monday during the science fair. Courage has scheduled balloon launches throughout the week, and Ken on the team is always open. Him and Dr. Demo are always open to, bringing folks to the site. And so it's just a matter of coordinating that with community. And so I will put my email in the chat, and for folks that are interested in getting connected, if we can talk about the science education program for next year, or even just other opportunities for field trips and taking folks to see that.
Okay, and then
happened at Morgan State too, also.
Jeremy has his hand raised.
Perfect, thank you. Hi, everyone. Jeremy Lawson. My question to James and Ben, I saw the models and the data that you had. Is that data available for public consumption? Is that something you can share, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, the information that we have with regards to our models, we can share. Some of the modeling that's already been done by the city, those reports and a story map is available, so we can definitely share that with you. Some of the stuff as we do more modeling, we are trying to be very cautious about what we share and who we share it with, because we also understand that there may be some related insurance risk with some of this information. So as we meet with communities and continue to work with DPW and other stakeholders. We're just keeping that in mind, that there's benefits for communicating this flood risk, but also understanding that there may be some other risk for people. But please reach out to me directly, and I'll go ahead and share some of those results with you.
Yeah, and I'll just note, I mean, please do reach out to us for any specific interest, because we'd love to work collaboratively with folks from the area. We also do have a system for data sets as they mature to go out through the Department of Energy. So I'm just putting in the chat the link to the archive that the Department of Energy keeps. And so all of our data, as we get them ready, go out there for direct download.
And I guess the follow-on question to that is just, I understand the data and the models that you have, but what's your aptitude for using more advanced AI methods to, I guess, better present this story?
Interesting. So yeah, I thought I had an answer, and you said to better present the story, which is interesting because we're definitely using AI on the analysis side, right? So it's kind of under the hood a lot in some of the algorithms that we're talking about. But we've not, if you're talking about telling the story, we have not taken on anything like large language models or any other kinds of AI generative technologies to communicate or to synthesize. So that's something that's an interest of anyone on the call. Would love to talk more about that.
Okay. Yeah,
And I will say we are starting to use AI to communicate the flood risk. So some of the images that you did see, we were taking actual pictures, and then those pictures were now animated with just little video clips to try and communicate flood risk. We're going to try and use some of this when we go do focus groups, and understanding when and probably why people report flooding or don't report flooding, because and communicating that with images and videos. So there's a difference between somebody's perceived risk if the water is only ankle deep versus shin, knee deep. I know one of my students that's working on this, Julia's online with us. But getting that feedback, and using those AI tools to help communicate that flood risk to people.
perfect. I'll definitely reach out to both of you. My company, we do a lot of work in this area, and so I'd definitely like to share.
Awesome, thank you.
Kimberly also.
Yes, I have a question. Are you doing anything in Bella Edison? And my reason for asking is because I live in Bella Edison, and a lot of times we're kind of like sandwiched in between more like Montebello, but it gets a lot of flooding. However, we don't get a lot of flooding, right? Not that I'm aware of. So have you partnered or looking to partner with certain organizations in Bella Edison?
We can, and what I'll say is we do have an upcoming event at Hopkins Eastern Campus off of 33rd. And we will send that announcement to you, and then we'll also send something over to Bella Edison as well for that event. It's a tree adoption event, but this is also the time where we're going to kick off our flood survey and search for folks to join our focus groups. But right now we know kind of like where a lot of the chronic flooding issues are, but we're really looking for more engagement from the different neighborhoods to not only tell us where the streets are flooding, but where people are seeing basement flooding.
Right. Now that's one thing we do get a lot of. We do get a lot of basement flooding. We don't get a lot of street flooding, but we get a lot of basement flooding.
And that's going to be very, very important for us to learn and understand. And we can and a lot of times we need to get that data directly from homeowners and the different neighborhood groups.
Well, I'm one of them.
So we'll definitely get that survey out to you and other folks in the neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you.
There are other people in front of me, but I can't figure out how to raise my hand. So I just want to raise my hand verbally, or I can just sit here with my hand up. But
Okay,
I'd like-
we will take note of that. Thank you.
I would like to ask a question after some of these other folks.
Yes, and okay. I just want to go to the chat. There's some questions in the chat before we go with the hands that are raised. And I don't know if you've answered this already. Is it Kayla? Do you include the drone with the balloon launches?
So we are doing some drone data collection. It's not currently coordinated with balloon launches. We're more using the drone for mapping of heat and physical properties, whereas the balloon launches are getting these profiles of the atmosphere. We don't currently have drones that do atmospheric profiling, so we haven't coordinated those particular activities.
Okay. And then it says, do you all have in-house GIS capabilities? The models and maps you all shared were really impressive. I am not sure a lot of locations have access to this kind of science.
Yeah, well, thank you. And yeah, we have a number of those maps that were generated by researchers and students and some of our partners. So yeah, very happy to collaborate and take on ideas about how GIS visualization could be useful for Baltimore.
Okay, so let's skip to Katie.
I was just wondering if, as part of the work that you all are doing, if you're doing any deliberate thinking about the policy implications of your work and or with policymakers who are maybe collaborating with you to think about how to make what you're doing into policy recommendations. I ask this because I know that that with your mapping strategies, you can tell people kind of more of like the neighborhoods that are more in danger if they lose more forested land, and more in danger of flooding, more in danger of heating up. I'm sure there are other related things within your studies that might not be forest related, but could be advocacy and policy points.
Yeah, and I mean, I like to say advocacy and policy, right? Because those are related and also distinct things we're trying to do. So I would say that from an advocacy perspective, very much in having the questions driven by some of our community partners, the objective there is to say, okay, what are you trying to achieve and how can data inform that? And so that ends up being very much a kind of a relationship and customized activity for different partners. On the policy side of things, and this also came up in the chat, which government agencies are we working with? It's been primarily with city agencies. And so one way we do that, of course, is just in conversation and finding out their particular targeted questions people have, like DPW now on some worker safety with heat issues, as you might imagine. We're in communication with them and planning on some of the longer term strategies regarding flooding and heat. But we also try to integrate to ongoing plans. So we try to support things like the city's climate action plan update and the DP3 plan that the city's produced in any way that we can leverage the efforts we're making to advance those kinds of policy guidance documents that the city generates on its own. But I'd love to follow up with you, Katie, on any other ideas.
Yeah, I have some ideas at a state level around some of this for sure.
Great, thank you.
Dante.
Thank you for picking me. I think I got in a little late here in this particular conversation, but I guess I'm curious when it comes to this project, and kind of akin to what Katie was bringing up. Is going to be an analysis of, perhaps the need for or recommendation for more permeable spaces within these communities, knowing that is a key strategy to minimize the floodwaters and obviously restoring groundwater and filtering all the toxics that would come from stormwater runoff. And are there it's conversations around that as partial solution, because I do feel like that is a thing that tends to be missed out on, in addition to a greater need for compost implementation around the city to minimize impacts of flooding as well. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, if there already existing recommendations regarding sustainable approaches to minimizing stormwater runoff, or if these are just kind of general observations of I guess flood frequency in these different communities.
Yeah, that's something that has come up a lot. We have these regular meetings with the Department of Public Works, and they're very interested in really how we look at soils compaction, and then how those soils could maybe be amended to reduce some of the stormwater runoff. Um, but it's also with this understanding that amending soils, adding green infrastructure is only part of the solution. It's not going to solve all the flooding. And what we're trying to do is see at what levels and how much can we kind of optimize the placement of a lot of those practices, because what's also of interest is not just the quantity of water, but it's also the quality of water, and that's also a big policy and regulatory push in the state. So we're keeping all of that in mind. And one of our students has been working, Julie has been working on looking at the soil amendment part. What do we need to do, particularly when a lot of the action needs to happen on private property, and really getting communities and individuals involved in that effort. And then how do you push a lot of that? And some of that may come from working with the city and the stormwater utility to really encourage and credit those practices for people once they get them implemented.
Thank you.
Okay, Krishmir.
Thank you. I hope everyone is having a great afternoon. I kind of piggybacking off of the community aspect related to individual basements and all that good stuff. Wondering if there's been a connection, if y'all are tracking a connection with construction. In a lot of communities that I work in, a lot of the disruption happens because people are digging below the water table, and they're not knowledgeable. So kind of to Katie's point, maybe some policy or advocacy around some accountability on people who might mess it up, create it unintentionally. So yeah, just all those things. That's it. Thanks.
Michael, I don't know if you still have a question, but here's an opportunity for you.
Yeah, I do. I love seeing the data. So thanks to James and Ben. And the overlapping issues of stormwater and heat island, I think, can really be leveraged, as was pointed out. If you apply green infrastructure, you can reduce heat island effect. I work in the design space, so we do zero energy design and regenerative design with holistic, non-toxic building envelopes to hit zero energy. And we're increasingly being asked to participate with community members in smaller projects that they hope to scale. Our objective is going to be to aggregate grassroots beneficial effects of regenerative design, put it into a hopper, if you will, of aggregated benefits that could attract investment dollars from, say, the city, the Department of Public Works, that doesn't want to have to, enlarge storm drains or what have you, but have better soils. But get some of the money past high-level policy recommendations right into the hands of grassroots organizations, because Baltimore is nothing if not incredibly rich in deeply committed community members working at the small scale, but they can't attract the capital because they don't have the scale. So I think if we just go from data to city policy, we're going to get more of the same delay, and we're not going to meet the needs we need to meet in short order. Whereas working with grassroots organizations that are already so committed to this stuff, we could leverage their engagement. We can help with design, and we want to share design through a more open commons sharing method and get things going by aggregating that data. But we would need help from folks like you, James, and Ben, and others, I'm sure, on this call to say, okay, up front, what are the benefits likely to be? How do we transform a design into projected benefits data and align it with your problem data? You've got the problem data set. We want to create the solution data set, but do it at the grassroots level and not rely on large-scale ecological developers who are still capital-driven, and not rely on city agencies that can be slow and, no offense, but inefficient at getting things up and out of the ground. If we go to them with articulated solutions and aggregated benefits, we could be making big impacts way sooner than if we rely on the typical methods of market, which will not happen, and the city, which will do the best it can under constrained resources and circumstances. Sorry, that was long-winded.
Yeah, no, but thank you. I totally agree. And I think some of the best successes we've had so far have been cases where community partners have taken the leadership on going out for implementation funds. Because unfortunately, we're not an implementation project, right? As you point out, this kind of problem space versus solution space. And so in cases where we can leverage the measurements BSEC is taking to strengthen applications by these grassroots organizations to get their implementation dollars, it's already worked a couple of times. And so would love to work with more partners on that.
Yeah, and speaking towards that, I know specifically the two folks that we worked with for our science education program, they were able to write grants utilizing that, speaking of that program that they had at their site to get more funding to do tree plantings and have technical assistance on their site.
Okay. Sean, welcome. Hello.
Thank you so much. I am always just so overpowered by the bright people that are in Baltimore. But we live in like this multiverse, right? Where all the smart people are over here talking in this one little huddle. And the students that I talk to don't get much of the benefit of your knowledge and the projects that you're on. And so if I was going to go in and talk to a teacher and say, here are 5 ways that your students could do summer projects, citizen science projects over the summer, or do them when they come back with you, like how would you plunk that into an environmental health study or science course? And is there a link to communicate their home experience to your studies? Are there things that they could do? We do some air quality testing at schools, and I'm like, well, over the summer, those air quality monitors could go home with them. And we could do heat studies. We could see, how hot is it on your 3rd floor? Those kind of things.
So, I mean, Khalia, you might be the best position to respond to that. I would say that, yeah, Sharon, I think these are great ideas, and we're trying to do some of that with our community science programs, as well as with kind of individual educational activities that Khalia has been coordinating. One thing I will say that we have not done is established a curriculum that gets integrated to the city school system. And there, as I think people can appreciate, there's a real lot of opportunity there, and also a lot of overhead in terms of how to make that alignment happen in a sustained way. But something we'd be interested in exploring, I think, in the future. But Khalia, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, it reminded me of we're now currently working with the some grad students and PhD students from some of the collaborators on the project. So I think Ben might have mentioned in the beginning, we have Penn State, UMD, Morgan State, Hopkins, all on the project. And each of those think teams, most of them have students that are working in some capacity on the BSEC project, whether it's the data collection. We're now kind of organizing students that are going to be specifically geared towards the engagement and how they're involved in the community through that theme team. And so I am working we have a communications consultant on the project as well that's helping us create all of these different one-pagers and translating the science into understandable language that, we can share out with the community. And she is working with us to develop some curriculum with hopefully with the grad students and the PhD students that we can hand out when we are deploying the weather stations to community sites. We're also going to be giving some training to the grad students on, and this is less sciencey and more of the community side, but how to host, instead of using like surveys or data collection and, gathering stories, reflective art workshops and how they can lead those to gather community feedback from some of like the science education programs or the focus groups. So to answer your question, there are opportunities to get the students involved. Yes.
Right. So I think, from my viewpoint, if our students could be data collectors as well and collaborators, that's probably more fun for them, right? And they probably learn more. And so, yeah, any thoughts, either today or down the line, I'll put my email in the chat.
Yeah, if you can share your email, I can write it down.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And Mr. Gordon, we met at the event on Monday.
Yes, we did.
And what I'll say is we are always trying to leverage the work that we're doing in BSEC into other projects that we're doing at our universities and also with the community. So we do have something where we will have a focus on an educational framework called EPICS that's using engineering projects and community service and trying to leverage the data that we have. We have a recently funded NSF grant that will allow us to go into selected middle schools and do some of the monitoring like you're talking about, and would love to engage with you and have that conversation and see what we can pull out of those discussions. But that's something that's already started and allows us to see what we're doing in Baltimore versus other cities that we're working with, namely Indianapolis.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you all so much.
We did have a question in the chat. It was in reference to the previous question. Are you all tracking construction projects in the city related to this project and how they impact stormwater?
I would say we are tracking some construction that's going on. What we're also looking at is really the potential for the redevelopment of a lot of vacant buildings, particularly vacant homes. Um, we are we do get things that get reported back to us. Particularly, we know that there's some construction that is happening in Broadway East, and there are some reports about that, almost what we call this lateral movement of groundwater. So those things do get taken into account. Um, but really, a lot of this focus will be looking at vacants and how you can turn those vacants into green spaces, and then looking at um, how certain green infrastructure practices can be incorporated with that redevelopment.
I think Chris Mayer has a follow-up question.
I do. A recommendation. That is a major conversation to community, right? Because they know that that's happening. They watch it happen and impact them. Baltimore City has a long legacy of greening projects. We have Adopt a Lot, Care a Lot, and this is no disrespect to what you're doing. This is just an add-on, right? We know how to do stormwater projects, water retention. Our community members have been in the water for a while. So they're going to request information that they haven't had before, and these are projects that have been done in the city, and specifically in these neighborhoods that you're speaking of. If we speak of Broadway East, Milton and Mumford, Bel Air, Edison, they've definitely been in the water. So as we, move forward, we want to make sure it's something that they can chew on. Every Baltimore citizen has seen the convention center model filled with water, and we understand what that means. So just as, you're speaking to community, just know that we are educated at this level, a lot of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're gonna have time for breakout sessions, and that's perfectly fine. Super, super content with you guys all asking questions. We have about 4 minutes left, so I'll open it up to Dr. Linda Lou Bear, who is also my mentor. So shout out to her at Morgan State University. And Glenn Robinson can ask a question. I think I saw his hand up. Dr. Lou Bear, you can go first.
Hi, everyone. So we've been talking about how this, the flooding is, a problem. Do you also think that there is a mindset that people carry with them that, okay, yeah, flood, I got to have, flooding occurs. There's this like acceptance on some level about flooding that we carry with us where we go, because it's like as if it's not I mean, it's a problem, and yet it's an acceptance. Do you feel that there is some kind of way this, is part of our culture?
Well, Linda, that's a deep question. And something we've had a lot of discussion about, because where it sometimes show up for us is the response rates that we're expecting to see when we're looking for data with regards to like 311 calls, right? So using that non-emergency number, and like I said, it's a deep question because we're seeing this in some other spaces, even with our tree adoption event, and seeing which neighborhoods and who's responding um, uh, to these calls. So part of that is trying to understand some of the differences that we see in our different neighborhoods. Those are who are a bit more disadvantaged, and knowing that, hey, this is just something that we expect, and trying to determine when somebody will make that call, or give us, or give the city some information about when and where a particular issue is happening. But yeah, that is something we're thinking about and beginning to really ask those questions when we start to do that work with our focus groups later this summer.
Glenn, we have about 2 more minutes. So do you still want to ask a quick question?
Yeah. James, are you mapping the lateral movement? Can you hear me?
Hey, good afternoon. This is Frank.
Say what?
We had someone who needed to mute, so you can go ahead, Glenn. Go right on.
Okay. Are you mapping the lateral movement of underground water in Baltimore? And are you suggesting that that movement could be a justification for creating green space?
What we're doing right now is really looking at the data that's available through 311, and then the interactions that we're having with our survey and our focus groups to determine where we see basement flooding, right? So that's going to give us some indication of that, of some of these groundwater issues. Also trying to understand some of the sewer backup issues that people have reported. But the other thing we're focusing on are the buried historic streams that we have in the city of Baltimore, because those streams are creating flow all the time in the existing storm sewers. But when we have these big events, those storm sewers really don't have the capacity. And that's when we start to see the basement flooding. And that's where we also see the street level flooding. So we're looking at where those buried streams are with DPW, and really getting mapping done with that, and overlaying that with where people are reporting the flooding that's impacting their homes.
Did you know there was an underground stream beneath the Kirk Avenue bus depot? And that on Exeter Hall and Asquith Street, there's a bridge. That's where the bridge is. It's outside your study area, I think, but just outside. It's in the southern part of Coldstream. That people have died there. Kids it would back up and people would go swimming, and then the sewer lid would pop off and create some kind of a vacuum, and people have. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood, so I'm speaking from years of recollection. But I just thought I would point that out. But I thought that if you're mapping the lateral movement, okay, of the underground streams, that could be a good justification, a reasonable justification, okay, for demolition of vacant properties if there's a correlation between the two. That's my comment.
Well, thank you all so much for your participation in this webinar. Thank you so much to Dr. Zaitchik for his support initially for the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit, and his continued support. Thank you to Dr. James Hunter, and thank you to Khalia for your support as well, and for the nuggets and the gems and the information that you dropped today. We are going to end it here. Everyone have an amazing rest of the Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Khalia. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Excellent.